It's impossible to put a judgment on any given experience or happenstance when it happens. So you have to trust that it's going to be the way it is going to be.
For many people in the world, there is a moment of clarity when you see the world differently than you saw it previously. Those are the moments when we wake up to life. I'm Rabbi Josh Bennett, and this is Waking Up to Life, a podcast about those moments. I'm so excited today to welcome to the show my good friend and longtime connected member of Temple Israel, Ben Chutz. Ben is an entrepreneur in the area of social impact technology. He's the founder of Birdhouse, but now is working as a consultant, partnering with social technology companies to make this a better world. Ben, thanks for being on the show.
It is an absolute pleasure.
I have had the wonderful opportunity of being a part of your life for almost my entire career at Temple Israel. Your family has been engaged here at Temple Israel. We have a friendship independent of that family. And you are one of the people who inspires me most in the world because of your outlook on life. I turn to you for technology advice. I turn to you for worldview advice. And you shared with me recently that you have a list of moments in your life that have sort of changed you. You know, this show is about one moment, but you have a whole list of moments that you track on your phone.
That's right.
Talk about that list and why you're doing that.
So, thank you for having me here. This is really just wonderful. And you actually have been a part of my life for the majority of my life. Maybe the majority of your career, but the majority of my life, since I met you when I was 10 years old.
Pretty crazy.
40. So, yes, I keep a list of what I call transcendent moments. So moments of particular importance in my life. You can call them a pivotal moment. You can call it an inflection point. Basically, the only criterion to qualify for that list is that my outlook on life, my understanding of myself, my understanding of the universe is different afterwards than it was before.
So most people look for one of these moments in their life, maybe two of them if they're lucky, but it sounds to me like you've had many of them. So what do you think that means?
I don't think it's unique. I think if you sat down and thought through your life, you would come up with a number of these moments. I just like writing things down and collecting information about the world, about myself, and this is one of those things that I've just sort of kept as one of my many pinned notes on my phone. And I think it's really fun to look back at those, consider those experiences, consider what I learned. And really what I like most about it is because there's such a fundamental shift in my state of mind before, after versus before, it can be difficult to identify with the person I was before based on where I am after. But I think that connection is really important. And the better I can identify and remember and remain connected and friends with that person, the more whole I feel, and the more integrated as a person I feel, so that I don't have these multiple different versions of myself, flying around my consciousness.
So there's two things I'm hearing you say. One is that if you pay attention, all of us probably have many of these moments, but we typically aren't so in tune with them. And the second thing I'm hearing is that you go back to that list in order to evolve as a person, and it actually helps you to have the list in your phone so that you can watch that evolution happen and understand the person you were and the person you're becoming.
Yes, I love that list. It's really just a cherished, it sounds funny to say this out loud, but it's a special list. And I don't want to give the impression that there's 100 things on this list. I'm not having these epiphanies, every other week. I think that would be exhausting. What I've found as I'm looking through the list, and I looked through that list again before coming on to this podcast with you, is that there's a moment for each phase of my life, generally speaking. There aren't more than one, pivotal or transcendent experiences in any given phase.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that because Jewishly speaking, I'm the rabbi here on this podcast, that's very much a part of the history of our people. If you look at the biblical story, we are evolving from Abraham, who sort of identified this monotheistic attitude, to a very different Judaism by the time the Moses story comes around. And then if you follow that through history, we evolve, especially in the Reform movement, every single generation based on what happened before. And so this response to ourselves actually defines our future in a beautiful way. I'm assuming you feel that way also as a human being.
Yeah, they're stepping stones, right? Each experience, because my mind state, and really anybody who experiences a transcendent moment, by nature, your mind state is different after than it was before. And so by default, that sort of begins your next phase. That is the first step, or early on, or that's the transition period. They're sort of, in a way, keeping a list like this almost bookends periods of my life.
I know that everybody who's listening is thinking what I'm thinking right now, which is we need to hear one of your moments. We've talked about it generally, this list that you carry. Are you willing to share one such moment so that we can unpack that and understand how the before and the after affect one another?
Sure, yeah, of course. Of course. So, and it doesn't have to be some big, some big momentous event, right? A lot of times we think that, it takes a certain severity to, trip your mind into thinking differently or realizing something. Sometimes it can just be an everyday thought that spirals.
In fact, it's exactly the point of the podcast, that if you listen over the years that I've been doing this, some people have momentous stories, and most have mundane moments. But if we approach those mundane moments with the power that I think they possess, there is something to be learned from every single one of these transformative times. So give us one. What is your transformative moment that you want to share?
So about 3 years ago, I am working for somebody else. It's an organization called Volunteer Match. It's a website that connects volunteers with nonprofits that are looking for volunteers. And they were going through some leadership transitions. And I thought I'd been there for about 2.5 years, started as head of marketing and business development. Then I was put in charge of building the data and analytics function, which hadn't existed before. And so I was doing that, and I was in a position where that I had never been in before, which was deciding when I wanted to leave a job. If you work for yourself, you have that. But if you work for other people, then, you perform well, you don't perform well. I have struggled with being a good employee over the years. And it wasn't until later on it wasn't really until after I became an entrepreneur that I understood. I came to understand how to be a good employee. So I'm in this position where I have the opportunity now to make the choice to leave if I want to. And I thought, I love this work. I've done social impact tech my entire adult life. It's all I want to do professionally. It is the future. I want to do it on my terms. I want to go back to doing it on my terms. I want to, I love this organization that I'm working for. I love the people that I'm working with, but I want to be able to have more control over my schedule. I want to have more control over what I charge. I want to decide what I want to work on and when I want to work on it. And I want to have more influence over the strategy and decision-making that goes into those projects and those efforts. So the way to do that was to go independent, right? Do the same work that I'm doing, but do it for myself, partner with different organizations, social impact, technology-driven organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, et cetera. And so I thought, I'm just going to send a couple notes to some people I know in the space and tell them what I'm doing. Ask if they have anything interesting that they're working on. And, long story short, would you like to, partner on some stuff? And within a week, and before I even go there, I'll say I had no expectation because I was employed. It was middle of COVID. It was an exhausting time. I didn't have to go anywhere. And it allowed me, again, for the first time, to look at and consider other opportunities without the stress of, needing something. And so I went in with zero expectation. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, maybe I'll send a couple more emails, maybe not. Anyway, I sent those 2 emails. I got a response from both of them within a week, and I was on my way. It was immediate. That had never happened to me before. And it may sound trivial, it may sound simple, but there was something that I took away from it that has helped me in bringing that sort of mindset forward in everything else that I'm doing. And the simplest way to put it is, it's detaching from the outcome, right? Giving up the expectation, relinquishing the expectation. And the big insight is, at least for me in my life, the harder I try to architect a specific outcome, the more I want something to be a certain way or become a certain way or a certain thing, the harder it is for me to actually attain that.
So the universal value that I'm hearing that everybody shares with you is that need for self-determination. We want to be the people that we want to be, and we don't want somebody else to define how we go about that life. And in your case, we're talking about a professional decision, but I think it applies to every part of life. And the answer at the end of your story is relieve yourself of the expectation, because that opens up the possibility. Is that a correct reaction?
I think that's one reaction. I think that's one thing you can take away from it. The other things that I think are worthwhile for me to at least take away from it is that if you believe, and I do, that the universe wants you to succeed, we are the ones standing in our own way, not other people. It's us. It's ourselves. Then if the outcome doesn't come to fruition the way you expect, you might not understand why in the moment, or for a year or two or many later, but eventually you will. And that hindsight, that context, the ability to appreciate that you may not have all the information right now, you may not ever, but eventually you might. And at that point, it becomes really interesting to look back and consider, if that had happened, this would have taken place. If that hadn't happened.
So I'm interested in hearing from you how it has affected you in the spirit of other areas of your life. You're a husband, you're a parent, you're a child, you're a friend. Have you seen that attitude that you now, by looking back at your list, you've learned that before and after? Have you seen it play out anywhere else that you can attribute to that new understanding of yourself?
I think that's a great question. Candidly, I've really only considered it in a professional context. But I think there's an element of presentness. When I slow down and allow myself to be now, here, with you, instead of somewhere in the future.
Yeah, you're a big thinker, and a lot of times you might get stuck in the thought process. And part of what I'm hearing is by letting go, it's such a cliche concept, by letting go, you are opening up more possibilities. And what's interesting to me, I'm thinking about it in my own parenting techniques. At some point, I simply have to take the risk, take the chance, let go, and see what happens next. And then the outcome is often nothing I could have imagined for myself, for my kids, in my relationships. So I think that's a really important understanding from your experience. And it's not what I thought you were going to say, which is just take the risk, write the letters, right? That's not really what you're saying. You're saying take a step back and let go of expectation and then check out what comes next.
Yeah, and I think parenting is a good example. You just brought it up, which parenting is full of uncertainty and risk and, to be fair, expectation on the part of the parents. And that, now that you bring it up, is something that has been very important for myself and my wife together in shaping our approach to raising kids, which is letting go of, who we want a child to be, letting go of or thinking originally about how to parent, as opposed to, well, this is the way that my parents did it. This is the way that it's been done. This is what other parents suggest. And trust that, you know your child best, and they are going to become who they are going to become. You can guide them. You can shape them, you can mold them, you can give them, you can form their moral compass and, point them in the right directions. But after a certain point, you really just have to say, you are your own person. You are going to be your own person. You have your own personality.
And expectation is limiting, whether it's what you experience from your own family or what society tells you. Expectation is limiting to our children, to our coworkers. And I think that one of the things I'm so beautifully taking in today is this idea that just by allowing the universe to function, not give up your place in the universe, but to allow the universe to unfold, is actually life-altering. Certainly has been for you.
It has been for me. It's just my experience. I think that it might be different for people who, you see certain people that are absolutely focused on one specific thing, and they won't stop until they get it, and they'll get it by any means necessary. And then they get it.
That's one approach.
Good for them.
Yeah. That's one approach, but there is also this other approach, and we don't have enough time to really talk about this in the lengthiness that it could be talked about. But I think of things like pushing children to go to college because that's just what we do in our society, or going to a particular university in the state of Michigan because that's what you should do. I think that one of the takeaways today is maybe that is limiting to other people's experience. And if we could sort of let go of that personal expectation about how things should be, then we are open to how things are going to be. And that is really beautiful.
Yeah. One thing I wrote down in the last several years was it's impossible to know in the moment what is in your own best interest. You think you do, you think you know, but in reality, you're only able to make a decision with the amount of information that you have available to you in that moment. And you'll make that decision, but you'll never know if it is going to lead you to the outcome that you want. But if you're expecting a particular outcome.
But in that moment, it's the best decision that you can make.
But in that moment, it's the best decision. And that can be applied to really anything else in life. You have an idea for what you want. You make decisions, small decisions, big decisions. And if you are paying attention, you can reflect back and you can see how something that may not have gone the way that you wanted ultimately led to something unexpected and fortuitous and something that you can't imagine living life without. And you become grateful. It's the Chinese parable that we've talked about, the Chinese farmer. Chinese farmer has a son. The son is riding a horse and he falls off and he breaks his leg. All the neighbors, come over. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to hear about your son's leg. What a shame, what a shame. And the farmer says, maybe. And, the next week, the armed forces come into the village and they recruit all of the young men for war. And they pass over the farmer's house because his son has a broken leg and can't fight. And all the neighbors come by and they say, oh my gosh, how lucky you are. It's, what incredible fortune you have. Your son wasn't taken. And he goes, yeah, maybe. And it goes on and on. It goes back and forth and back and forth. And, something that seems bad, like breaking a leg, can be good. Something that seems really great can actually become a curse in some ways. I mean, you just don't know. It's impossible to put a judgment on any given experience or happenstance when it happens. So you have to trust that it's going to be the way it is going to be. And at that point, you can put a judgment on it if you want in hindsight. But at that point is when you understand. Maybe. That gets you to the next point.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to make the decisions you have on your plate with the information at your disposal at that point in time.
So sadly, we have arrived near the end of the podcast. I'll have to have you on again for the part 2 of this conversation because we want to hear more from your list. I think there's great wisdom in that list. One of the things you probably know I ask everybody at the end of the podcast is there something you're reading, something you're watching that people should know about right now? A book, a television show, a podcast? What are you listening to or reading right now?
Well, I am making my way through a documentary called Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds. It's on Amazon. You can watch it on YouTube. It talks about, or I should say, it provides a scientific explanation for what we traditionally think of as the spiritual. So it talks about, fractals. I can't believe I'm going here because I'm not. I'm really not equipped to talk about this particular point.
I mean, it's okay,
but it's fascinating.
But the show is called Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds.
That's right.
And it's going to talk us through the science of the unknowable.
Yes.
Spectacular. Great recommendation. I cannot wait to watch it. And that may be the conversation about our next podcast together.
Sure.
Ben, it has been so good to have you on the show. My friendship with you means an enormous amount to me. And to have you share some of your wisdom with the listeners is really powerful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I hope everybody enjoyed the show. If you know someone who has a story to tell that would be able to be shared, please let me know. You can find my contact information below in the podcast description. You can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, continue to wake up to life.